Welcome to 28. Let's just keep moving. Talk. In the social psychology of social movements, evocatively describes the dilemma of cognitive dissonance without using the word. When he comments on an extremely rude letter sent to an editor of a paper from the follower of some leader that the editor had written an unflattering report about. Yeah, whatever. Commenting on the letter, Talk says, the latent message in this communication is something in the order of, your negative characterization is one of God knows, what's wrong with me? Stop it. Do it right. Talk says, the latent message in this communication is something in the order of, your negative characterization of one of the leaders of my movement hurts me deeply because I have come to rely on this person, and others like him, for security and support. If what you said were true, I would be in a serious predicament. I am therefore constrained to regard you as a very evil person. So he's translating it. Talk illustrates here not only the nature of the resolution of dissonance at work, but the power to strengthen the belief that an attack on that belief can have, as mentioned in Keisler's work. Your negative characterization of one of the leaders of my movement hurts me because I love him, and I need him. If what you said were true, I'd be a dumbass, and therefore, you must be evil. There you go. Philip Zimbardo, in Influencing Attitudes and Changing Behavior, mentions the role that cognitive dissonance seems to play in the specific case of conversion to beliefs of the Moonies. He points out that people are invited, not forced, to come on a weekend retreat to hear about the philosophies of Reverend Moon. He suggests that a person who doesn't believe in the philosophies, but sees himself behaving like the others do, while uncoerced to do so, will have to reduce the dissonance created by convincing himself that he does believe in Reverend Moon. One way to reduce dissonance is to seek social support for one's opinion. By finding other people who hold the same views, one can justify one's own holding of them. In the case of cults, says Zimbardo, where old lifestyles are abandoned for new, it is necessary to draw as many people as possible into the new lifestyle, so that the ever-increasing social support for the decision to join confirms its obvious rightness. The same sort of thing happened, as we saw with Mrs. Keach's followers, who actively sought converts after they had to face the dilemma of carrying on believing in her, or else acknowledging that they were dumbasses. Dissonance theory may help to explain why some people, when they are converted to a belief, hold on to it longer than others. Hoffman ran an experiment to test the role of conformity needs in the persistence of conversion. He subjected a number of students to pressure to change their attitudes on a particular topic. He subjected a number of students to pressure to change their attitudes on a particular subject. 2 weeks later, he tested them to see how many still held on to the new view and how many had reverted to the old. He found that those who had a high need to conform had far lower persistent conversion scores than those who had personalities less prone to conforming. The author says, suggestive is the finding that the longer one resists altering his position under pressure conditions, the longer he retains the altered position in post-pressure conditions. It might also be said that the longer one resists changing his position, the more need he has to square his change of position within himself, by believing in it all the more wholeheartedly. Sargent notes the same effect, although he attributes a different reason. He says, in Battle for the Mind, the amount of consolation... Reading's really hard for me today. I've probably been reading hard. Okay, that was a negative thought. The amount of consolidation needed to fix patterns of thought and behavior must depend on the particular type of nervous system as well as the methods employed. Some persons seem to observe new doctrines much more readily than others, but the slower, more obstinate types can be trusted to grasp them more securely once accepted. Philip Zimbardo, in an article on cognitive dissonance and the control of human motivation, makes an important observation on the nature of responsibility taking.
When subjects perceive that they must make an important decision, and that they have a clear choice in committing themselves to one of the possible alternatives, they must then assume responsibility for that decision. This process is one of the few behavioral events which makes them, and us, uniquely human. As the justifications, be they hedonistic, mystical, or rational, for making the given decision increase, the decision remains more externalized. The individual can point to circumstances which compel him to a given course of action, limit his choice, and reduce the risks attendant upon personal responsibility. In short, intrinsic justification minimizes the necessity for intrinsic justification. For psychological reevaluation of the alternatives, for changing one's values, attitudes, or motives. It appears from observations of our subjects' behavior in these experiments, as also from less controlled experiments, that most people try to avoid making decisions or accepting responsibility in situations of free choice.
It is an interesting paradox that most people treasure the concept of free choice, verbally defend it, or actively pretend to assume it, as in the case of the soldiers who march to the bathroom, yet in reality do all to avoid it. Zimbardo believes that an illusion of personal vulnerability effectively works against the taking control of one's own life, and works for any agents who would take control of it for you. Such beliefs as, others could be made to do that, but not me, and others could be swayed by speeches, but not me, are dangerous, because they set us apart from other people who are like ourselves, and therefore prevent us from learning from their experience what may be valuable for ourselves. Zimbardo compounds the point in his introduction to Influencing Attitudes and Changing Behavior.
Be forewarned that it is in this text that we are actively attempting to reshape your thinking about this sense of invulnerability. We know you can be more of the master of your own destiny if you learn to identify potential or existing sources of influence. We know you have a difficult task for yourselves, because research tells us that you are likely to ignore information about how the majority of people in a given situation react, and favor information about the isolated cases that fit your perceptions, preconceptions, or personal preferences.
It is no doubt very true that we never consider that we are the majority that wouldn't rush to help if someone was in an emergency, or that would give electric shocks to an innocent party. We instead absolve ourselves from collective responsibility of such findings by saying, I wouldn't have done that. And that is yet another example of cognitive dissonance at work. And here is the placebo effect. The power of belief is a remarkable force for changing expected or normal course of events, often enough unknown to the believer. Many are the tales told of members of primitive tribes who, once told by a witch doctor that they would die, or once told cursed by an enemy, proceed to die, when there is no physiological indication of imminent death. Similarly, belief in the spiritual healing process can effect a cure for even intransigent diseases. Intransigent diseases. While it is not the aim here to debate the contribution of the healer himself, it is worth quoting one case in which a doctor told 3 extremely ill women that a remarkable faith healer would cure them by absent healing. He built up their expectations and told them the time of day that the healer would set to work. No healer set to work, but after the appointed time all 3 women showed dramatic improvement. One, who had never recovered from a major operation on the stomach and had dwindled to nothing in weight, made a permanent recovery. Another had suffered chronic inflammation of the gallbladder. Her symptoms disappeared for years. The third, who was dying painfully of cancer, lost all of her symptoms and was trouble-free until her death. Such belief has its uses in traditional medicine. Biologically inert substances, properly called placebos, colloquially known as sugar pills, can effect cures as effectively as pharmacologically active drugs. Placebos are commonly used in drug testing. One of the patients is given the real drug, and the other the inactive substance. If the patients who take the real drug improve, and the patients who take the placebo do not, the improvement can safely be attributed to the drug and not to other factors. However, here human nature comes in to confuse the issue. Many people, known as placebo reactors, also demonstrate the desired improvements without the benefit of any chemical agents. The expectation that a sugar pill will induce the effects the doctor claims for it can lead to some bizarre physiological contradictions. For instance, a man suffering from severe nausea was given a drug that would normally induce vomiting. However, he was told that it would cure his vomiting, and it did. Some people who are given placebos even claim to suffer side effects, as well as improvements. Some people, given red, yellow, and blue placebos to try as a headache cure, reported back that only one color pill worked. The most popularly effective placebo was the red one? Also interesting because red is associated with pain. So they figured taking the pain-looking pill would solve their pain. It's so awesome! People who are placebo reactors have been found in research to be more neurotic, suggestible, and submissive than non-reactors. In Persuasion and Healing, Jerome Frank says, since a placebo is inert, its beneficial effects must lie in its symbolic power. The most likely supposition is that it gains its potency through being a tangible symbol of the physician's role as a healer. Once again, we need to believe that someone is in charge. Believing in the healer may well serve to reduce anxiety about one's condition, and as the conditions that respond as the conditions that respond best to placebos are those where bodily pain may be aggravated by anxiety and tension. This would tend to imply that placebo power is the power to allay the kind of stress symptoms which may prevent the body's own healing process from getting to work. Believing reduces anxiety, and this would tend to imply that the placebo power is the power to allay the stress symptoms which are preventing the body from beginning its process to heal. Okay. It makes all the more sense when one considers that more and more diseases are now seen as stress-induced in the first place. Frank mentions the placebo treatment of warts. The warts are painted with a bright dye, and the patient is told that when the dye wears off, the warts will be gone. Here, the success rate, which is high, may be attributed to the physiological effects of the power of belief. The emotional reaction to the placebo treatment, with the expectation of a cure, causes a change in the physiology of the skin. It creates an environment no longer conducive to the virus that causes warts. Electroconvulsive therapy for the treatment of depression, the vital ingredient of which, according to Sargent, is the current through the brain that induces a convulsion. Oh, we're talking about electric shocks here, baby. The electric shocks, here's what they do. Mr. Sargent says that they put a current through your brain, then you convulse. And it works real good, better than Zoloft. Can work just as effectively without any currents at all. Electric doctor and electric. An English doctor discovered that his Cetra machine hadn't even been functioning for 2 years, although it was thought to be working and consequently used every day. The patients had improved in accordance with expectations, both their own and the doctor's. Yet nothing had happened at all. This finding, that the ambience of the electric treatment may be the potent factor, not the shock, was later confirmed in a controlled trial. Placebo treatment is mentioned here to demonstrate the very real effects of suggestibility, expectation, and belief, which can be manifested in many ways, in many different sorts of circumstances, not just medical. It was earlier mentioned that a belief in the power of hypnosis was sufficient to make it work. One's own mental state can therefore significantly affect the outcome of events and impose its own order on an environment. While this, in some circumstances, may be a strength to be capitalized on, it may also be a vulnerability that others can take advantage of. Again, only by questioning assumptions can one isolate causes from effects. The weapons effect. In The Writing on the Wall, McCarthy says, in defense of her belief, that it is possible to behave well whatever the circumstances. Nobody by possession of a weapon can force a man to kill anybody. That is his own decision. If somebody points a gun at you and says, "Kill your friend or I'll kill you," he is tempting you to kill your friend, and that's all. Or maybe it is not all. Some American psychologists have found that the weapons effect works in far more insidious ways to influence behavior. Merely the sight of a gun can alter reactions, and it's not just on the part of the person wielding the weapon. Recently, Turner, Simmons, and Associates carried out a couple of intriguing experiments to prove the point. On 2 occasions, they invited students at a college carnival to throw sponges at a clown. The first time, a rifle was left in a conspicuous position in the front of the booth where the clown was standing. On the second occasion, there was no rifle on view. Both times, the clown hurled insults at some of the sponge throwers to see if his hostile manner made them more aggressive in their throwing. It was found that insults had no effect on the students' behavior. But what did have a marked effect was the innocent or not-so-innocent presence of the rifle. Students who saw the rifle reacted far more aggressively than the rest, throwing considerably more sponges at the clown. Ooh, interesting. I will come back quickly to bring you the second experiment's results.